Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Albers, and welcome to This Week in Anderson on the Big Guy Sports Podcast. And as always, join me as my co-host, Steve Ellis. And Steve, I'll tell you what, super excited for our next guest. He's not only, one of my former teammates, but I'll tell you what, one of the best guys that I've ever been around, teammate, everything, and just a great guy. And I can't wait to catch up with Korey Mitchell tonight.
Well, we haven't done a Zoom in a while, Danny. So it took us a minute to get set up here, but this one's well worth it because as we go back in time, this guy was not only a class act, but just well liked by everybody. And as you have said, Danny, I mean, everybody has nothing but great stuff to say about Korey. So I can't wait to get into this.
Yeah, it's like I said, just one of my favorite teammates, as I said, is joining us is Korey Mitchell. Korey, thanks for joining us tonight.
Oh, no problem, Dan and Steve. And it's an honor to talk to two Hall of Famers. I catch your podcast all the time, so it's definitely a pleasure and honor to be honest and a part of it.
Yeah,
thank you.
I appreciate it, Korey. So we always kind of start this off and talk about where you're growing up and all that, and I know your story, and I knew that you didn't grow up at the early age in Anderson, but talk a little bit about where you grew up and then your progression on how you got to Anderson High School.
Yeah, so I basically grew up in New Jersey and New York. So I spent 12 years in New Jersey. Then it seemed like, my dad was a sales exec for a paper company. And every time he got promoted, we required to move. So it was, I think, going into sixth grade, we moved up to upstate New York, this little town called Monroe. And so I was there from sixth grade all the way up until after my freshman year. And so my dad got promoted again, and we're excited. We're moving to a big city, Cincinnati. And so, it's bittersweet, leaving a lot of friends behind and just started high school. But, I remember talking to my high school football coach at the time, and we had a pretty good program. And he said, you know what, I hate to see you go, but you're going to a really good situation in Cincinnati, and he was like, it's a great sports town. Especially for high school football, he told me about the Molars and the Saint X's and the things of that nature. So he's like, you're gonna have a blast when you get there. So I believe it was the summer of '85. So I just go into my sophomore year. We did the move over the summer, and like one of the first things we did, first order of business was finding out about the football team. And I think Danny, you guys had already started 2-a-day practices or just about to. And I remember walking into the weight room and I see Chris Hoffmeyer there, and he's got like 4 45-pound weights on each side and squatting. And I was like, whoa, it was like kind of my introduction, to Cincinnati football. But it was great. Coach Stowe was the coach at the time, and I was really fortunate. I wasn't going into first day of school not knowing anybody. I started practicing with you guys, and you guys took me in right away. And it was just great. I mean, day one, I was nervous, but you guys made me feel at home and, part of the family. And, it was a really great start with that.
Oh, it was, we were thrilled to have you because not only did you play linebacker, but you played fullback. So you played, those positions that we really needed. And that's just got to be, extremely just a kind of exciting, but also a weird time to, like you said, you're coming and you're not, you don't really know anybody. And I think that what you just said was pretty cool that, we were, there with you with open arms and loved every minute of it.
Definitely.
So Korey, I just want to ask you about the transition coming from where you were before. I mean, what was the school like compared to Anderson, and what were some of the differences that you weren't aware of? I mean, I know you said your coach had said about the football town and everything like that, but what was some of the differences?
No, that's a great question. The size of the school was pretty much the same. I'd say, comparable, but, one really blatant difference and my coach, in New York talked to me about this was, in New York, we played our varsity games Saturday afternoon. And here was Friday night. So, he talked to me about, the big games at Friday night, and it's the big event. That's where everybody goes. It's the number one place in town to go to. And, he was really hyping it up. And so, I wasn't sure if it was actually going to be that way, but, Dad, our first game was with Nick. And, I started linebacker, as a sophomore right next to Donnie Marcello. And I was in awe. the fans, the lights, all the hoopla, and that's like a huge in-town rivalry, Anderson McNick. And so
Right.
that was my introduction as a sophomore,
Wow.
in high school, playing my first game, because the previous year in New York, I was on the freshman team, so I went from, I didn't play JV, I went from freshman to varsity. So I think, Steve, that's a really good question. I'd say just the biggest thing was you really got a taste of, hometown sports. The entire town's in it. Friday night is that big event. And then not just with the high school, but, you go to the local news stations, and Friday night, that's the highlight. They had high school football specials. I mean, there was almost more coverage of high school football than it was like UC, or even the Bengals.
Yeah.
So that was really cool. That was really cool seeing that, and just seeing everybody get into it. And yeah, it was pretty cool. I think about that a lot even to this day.
I mean, just what a game to start off though, too. Like you said, the McNick game. Like you said, if it wasn't a McNick game, there probably wouldn't have been as many people there. But for you to start off with the McNick game, and it was just, and they were coming off of going to the state finals the year before, so it was packed.
So
exactly.
I got another question for you, but I want to ask: was there any other areas of town that your family thought about moving to? That we wouldn't have got to meet you or know you, or you wouldn't have got to Anderson?
So my parents didn't tell me this till actually, I think, even after I graduated, but they were seriously, they were still looking at Anderson Township, but they were looking at the possibility of sending me to St. Xavier.
Oh,
and, and so my mom, she worked all the way up until we moved to Cincinnati. And then, she decided, to not work. And so she was like, well, I'm available to take you to school every day. And they told me they didn't even ask me, whether, what I wanted to do, but the one factor was they wanted, to be in the community, so we lived in Anderson, and they wanted me to go to Anderson and be a part of the Anderson community. And I think that really means a lot. I know kids, go to Moeller and St. X, and they don't necessarily, live there, and they travel far away. But I think that was important. I think they made, that was the right decision. I didn't realize it at the time, but I'm definitely glad that they decided to do that.
So you got to one of the fortunate ones to play for both Coach Stowe and Coach Siriano. So talk about that experience of Coach Stowe, who's played on a national championship team at Ohio State, and his style of football, and then talk about Coach Siriano coming in, this young guy, full of energy and ready to change the culture of the program.
Definitely. So, Coach Stowe, I always tell people that if he was, made the career out of, Army career, he'd have been a general, because he had a commanding presence.
Yeah.
And, I tell folks that, he was tough, but he was fair.
Right.
And, I always loved hearing stories from Coach Stowe about his time at Ohio State. And, two stories that really, that I really, enjoy. And I end up telling other people, is that, he played with Jack Tatum.
Yeah.
And, he would tell me how scholarship players were, quitting the team because they didn't want to practice against him. That's how hard a hitter and how intense he was, that guys were giving up their scholarship because they didn't want to go against Tatum, in practice. And, and so the other story that Coach Stowe told that I really love is, he told, they went to the Rose Bowl, and I'm not sure if it was a national championship season, it may have. And so, they're flying into Pasadena, and they're like, oh, they're talking about on the plane, talking about where they're going to go and party and clubs and stuff. And so I guess Woody Hayes caught hold of that, and he started sending the athletic trainers around the plane and started taping ankles while they were on the plane, started taping people's ankles. And they went straight from the airport to the practice field. So he set the tone. This is a business trip. We're here, we're here to play football. We're not here to hang out and party and all that. And yeah, I was like, wow, that's intense.
Intense. Wow. So what about Coach Siriano?
So Coach Siriano, so he came, unfortunately, Coach Stowe, was let go. He stayed in Anderson. I believe he was the athletic director.
Right.
when Coach Sirianno came in. But, the first time I met Coach Sirianno was during the off season. And, I'm in the weight room and I see this guy like running around the track doing sprints and I was like, who's that? They're like, that's your new football coach. I was like, what? I was like, oh, okay. Then he comes in the weight room, he starts, doing all his, clings and I was just like, okay, yeah, coach is bringing it, and he was setting the example. He's like, if I'm going to demand, my players to be fit and in shape and give 110%, he's like, I'm going to give it myself, but from day one, you knew Coach Sirianno was different. And they had different styles, Coach Stowe and Sirianno, and I respect both of them. I respect both of those gentlemen.
Yeah.
But Coach Sirianno, just from hearing him speak, when he's coaching, his intensity, his attention to detail.
Yeah.
I use a lot of lessons learned from Coach Sirianno, during my time at West Point and even in the Army and life today. And Danny, I've said this before, is I believe Coach Sirianno really put Anderson on the map, in terms of football. And another story, I served 22 years in the Army, and I was on a deployment in Iraq, and they had a USO coaches tour, and one of the coaches was Coach Tressel. It was college coaches, and so I'm in line, to get pictures and autograph, and I get up to Coach Tressel, and he's like, "Hey, where are you from?" I was like, "I'm from Cincinnati." He's like, "What high school did you go to?" And I was like, "Cincinnati Anderson." He's like, "Oh, Vince Sirianno." And then we start talking. He starts getting, talking about Coach Sirianno and how well he knows him and all that. So it was pretty cool. Some of the other coaches was like, "Hey, are you trying to recruit that guy? You trying to see if he has any eligibility left?" They give Coach Tress a hard time, but yeah, it was pretty cool. So 1,000 miles away in a combat zone, and college coach, Ohio State big time program, knows not knows the name, but knows him well, knows Coach Sirianno.
That's
pretty cool.
So speaking of that, real quick before I get into my next question, is that obviously playing for Coach Stowe, and then I coached that first year with Coach Soriano, and I really, Korey, thought I knew football, and I did not know football until I coached with Coach Soriano, and he really kind of taught. Do you think that it was your guys with that first year with Soriano, like, holy crap, football is a different, you know what I mean? Because it was obviously, like you said, Stowe and him are two different coaches.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you can tell Sirianno was a teacher of the game.
Right.
And a lot of us, the seniors, me, Matt Bailey, Steve Green, we always say, wish we had more than 1 year.
I agree.
With Sirianno. And then, Danny, this, what if we had, Coach Letterby as defensive coordinator and then Sirianno as a head coach during some of our teams, because we had some great defenses.
Absolutely.
The 85, your senior year, 86. We had some really, and unfortunately we just couldn't put it all together. We'd have great defenses, but we lose a lot of games by a touchdown, or even less.
Yeah. I mean, it was, we had, I think my senior year, I think we lost 4 games by a score of 7-0 or less.
Yeah.
We just couldn't do it. I mean, it's brutal. I mean, I think I brought this up with you before, Korey, is, I mean, you think about that Green Hills team that we beat, they went to the state finals and lost. Their only loss was to us. I mean, that's probably our highest scoring output of the year. That's just crazy. But, we talked about the McNick game. And I'm going to bring up the Turpin game, and just to let you know, in case you haven't heard, Anderson won 62-20 last Friday against.
I heard. That's awesome. That's awesome.
I had to say that one more time and rub it in just a little bit.
You got the news in Maryland. You got it.
Because that's what I do. But so that game, to me, the Turpin game, I mean, Minute game was big, but the Turpin game to me was always the big one for me. Talk a little bit about that rivalry for you and what that was like for you, because you got to do it for your sophomore, junior, and senior year.
Yeah. So the Turpin game was huge. I mean, Turpin and McNick, but Turpin was always special. And the one that I really remember was my junior year. We hadn't won a game. It was Coach Stowe's last year, and I think I had sprained my ankle the week of the game. I moved to fullback and was playing fullback and sprained my ankle in practice during the week, and tried to give it a go. And I think Donnie Marcelo was injured too. But I remember it was a really dramatic game because it was the last game of the season, and we had won it. We didn't want the seniors to go out without having a victory,
right?
And so what won the game was. Mike Ramirez, Billy Ramirez, his younger brother, sophomore, kickoff return, the distance for a touchdown. And that won the game, everyone's crying and cheering. And, I just remember Mike saying, I did it for my brother. I did it for my brother.
Yes.
I want my brother to go out with a win, and that's what it's all about. That's really, I know, I served in the military, as I said earlier, but you're doing it for your brothers, you're doing it for your town, you're doing it for your community. But, when it comes down to it, it's really for your teammates, the guy to the right of you, the guy to the left of you.
Totally agree, man. That's, and the thing we just talked about, my senior year, like we said, we had a record of 3-7, lost those games, 4 games by a score 7-0 less. And we had Bud Letterby was a defensive coordinator. I know Bud loved you, and he loved Donnie Marcelo as well. Yeah. Talk about what it was like, not only playing with Donnie Marcelo, but also playing for Coach Letterby, and what Coach Letterby meant to you.
Yeah, Coach Letterby, man. Wow, he's he was a hard coach, and he prepared Donnie and myself, and to the point where in practices he almost had me in tears. That's how hard he was. But I needed that, right. And again, just like I said with Coach Siriano, Coach Letterby really prepared me for life. Life at West Point, life in the Army, just life period. But, we still keep in contact, to this day. And I remember when I was at West Point, he actually brought his family up and came to visit. And, I took him on a tour and everything. So that really meant a lot to me. He may forget about it, but I bring it up every time we talk. I was like, hey, remember that time you came with the West Point? And, that was huge. So, I think actually he told me that Coach Siriano asked him to stay on. And he just felt, he felt it was just better for for him to part ways. But yeah, out of my even college, I put Coach Letterby up there. As one of the best coaches, because like I said, he was tough and he was hard, but it came from a good place. It came from a place where he really cared for you, and so I saw him probably about maybe 3 or 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. So his daughter's in Philadelphia, so I'm in DC, just outside DC. It's only probably about 2 hours away. Yeah. So I found out he was in town, and my wife, she knows how much Coach Letterby needs to be. She was like, let's go see him, let's go visit him. So we just hopped in the car and drove 2 hours to Philadelphia, and had dinner with the Coach Letterby and his wife and his kids and family. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
That is cool. And then obviously with Donnie too. You went side by side with him, and Donnie was a good ball player too.
Oh, he was great. He really helped me out. And like I said, he kept me grounded, kept me focused, because like I said, sophomore coming into this environment, my eyes are wide open, especially for the McNick game. But I owe Donnie a lot, in terms of just guiding me, and I looked up to him. I try to follow in his footsteps. He was senior class president, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do the same thing. I ended up being senior class president.
That's awesome.
But Donnie, we still keep in touch. He actually came to our class reunion, our 30 reunion. So it was great. Yeah. It was great seeing him there. But yeah, and we still keep in contact. And I got to get to Anderson, man. It's been way too long.
I would love it. I actually just called my sister and just said I was gonna interview you, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, you gotta tell him I said hi." And then my brother Mike, was the same way. He's like, I love Korey, just so my family I know loved you too, man. And they would love, if you ever come in town, you got to let us know.
Oh, definitely. No, you got a great family, Dad. It's definitely, Teresa's my classmate, so yeah. So
when was the last time you were at Anderson at the high school?
So I think it was for my 30-year reunion, and so I want to say I came up to I forget who we were playing, but I came up to the booth, and I think we had a rain delay. I do remember that, the game, I think it was about an hour delay because of the rain.
Okay.
But yeah, so the last time I was up there for the reunion, I try to make the class reunions, even though I was president. Kelly Burnside, she's the vice president, so she does all the planning. So I gotta give credit to her.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been, so that was the last time. So yeah, I'm definitely due for.
So it's a little different than when you played, having a turf field now. And
exactly. It's the uniforms, they even changed the uniforms after we left. After my senior year, I think they went with like the orange pants, and I think they even went with the colored, the orange helmets.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, they wait till we leave, and then
exactly right.
they get all classy with the uniforms. So yeah.
Exactly right.
But it's good to see. It's good to see.
Yeah.
Let's get into after high school, Korey, because as you've mentioned a few times that you had a great career, serving the country and everything. But how did all that transpire, and what took you there from high school?
So yeah, that's a great question. So I really didn't know much about the military. Knew a little bit about the military academies, West Point, Air Force Academy, and Navy. And so, I just started getting a lot of recruiting letters, and ironically, I got recruited by the Air Force Academy, Army, but I didn't get anything from Navy. I'm glad now, because they're our rival, but Air Force Academy was recruiting me more heavily than Army. I get something in the mail or a call from Fisher DeBerry at least once a week.
Fisher DeBerry,
and
gosh.
And so and they had Chad Hennings that just won the Outland Trophy. He ended, he served in the Gulf War flying A-10 jets,
really?
And then went on to the Dallas Cowboys. But yeah, so I was like, wow, that's pretty. And they were in the athletic conference too. Right. But yeah, so I went on a visit to West Point, and I was just hooked. Just the atmosphere. It's almost like I try to tell people, you walk into a house that when you're home, looking for a home, and you may go into five or six houses, and you walk into one, you're just like, this is it. Right. And that's what I felt, when during my visit at West Point. And but I wasn't sure, because when you make the decision to go to West Point, you're not just signing up for 4 years, you have a 5-year commitment, after you graduate in the Army. So it's a pretty big decision. Yep. And I was offered, at the end of my visit, and I didn't give him a decision, right there. I was like, I want to go home, and my dad came on to visit with me, and I was like, yeah, I want to go home, talk to you and Mom about it, and so they just kept telling me it's a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity, and the other thing, so that was a big thing, and I just knew the history and prestige, of West Point. And history is one of my favorite classes, and they have the saying, a lot of the history we teach was made by the people we taught. And so, I thought about it for a while, and, I decided to go. And I think one thing that helps make, especially, kids now, because, when they make the decision, we're not at war now, but, we were, for, the last, 20 plus years. You can go there for the first 2 years, and you don't have to make a commitment. It's after that, after your junior year, when you're committed, to the career for the military and that obligation. So you do have 2 years to decide if this is with you. And with me, when I went there, it was just like each year it just grew on me. I just felt more in love with the Army, and, just the brotherhood of, Army football. Each year I was there. And so, to this day, like some of my, lifelong friends, are my, Army West Point football teammates, right. And guys that I served with in the Army, after that. And that was the other thing too. Like, after I graduated, I was like, all right, I'm going to do 5 years, and then I'll get out. I'll do something else. And that 5 years will help me figure out what I want to do, what I want to be when I grow up. And so same thing happened, each year in the Army, I was doing well, I was having fun, and I look up and it's already 5 years. And so I did consider getting out. I was actually going to join the Secret Service.
Really?
And wow, be on, like, the president. Yeah, I had a buddy that I played football with at West Point, he was on the vice president's detail as a Secret Service agent.
Wow.
So I was like, I want to be. That's what I want to do.
Wow.
And had the interview set up and everything, and I let one of my bosses talk me out of it. And he did the same thing. He actually got out, and he was like, I didn't give it enough time, and he ended up going back in. And he was like, he told me, he's like, Korey, I think you have you can make a career out of this, and you could be successful. And so I gave it another consideration. I stayed in, and I'm glad I did. It was one of the best decisions I made, to make a career out of the Army. And again, it was I had a blast. It was a great time. There were some tough times, but there were more good times than tough times, in the Army. But it was great. It was great. I was really, really blessed and fortunate.
I'm sure you would have been successful at anything you did, Korey.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate it.
As much as a go-getter as you are, and smart and intelligent, I'm sure you've been successful. I want to, ask, because Danny brought up the Anderson Turpin game, and if you don't realize by now that Danny and I live in this little bubble in Anderson Township, we played in just a little bit bigger type of a game when it came to the Army-Navy game.
Yeah.
I mean, words probably can't even describe it, but go ahead and give it a shot on what that was like, and it has to be pretty patriotic at the same time.
Yes. Yeah. So we're pretty much brainwashed from day one of our cadet basic training to beat Navy. we only have so many responses as they call the freshman plebes. And the only time you can speak freely is when you say beat Navy.
Wow.
Any other time, you can only speak. You have to ask permission to speak. And so it's beat Navy from day one. And then you walk around West Point and you just see signs all over the place. Beat, go Army, beat Navy. I'm painted on buildings, the roofs of buildings. It's just plastered everywhere. So it's like I said, it's ingrained in you from day one. And then just playing football and in the game, it's just taking another step, another level. I'd probably say the week of the Army Navy game in terms of practices is the most intense practice. Sometimes the practices are just as intense as the game.
I bet.
And I've almost been thrown out of a couple of those practices because for fighting. I'm not condoning fighting, but it gets intense.
Yeah,
it gets intense. And so and then you get to the actual game, and I remember my first one being a part of it. It was just, again, you're in awe. You're playing in the NFL stadium. We normally play at the time when I played, it was Veterans Stadium in Philadelphia. So playing there, and then just millions of people are watching. The stadium, the game's sold out, but and I played during the time of Desert Storm. And so knowing that a lot of folks who are in harm's way are watching this game, and for 60 minutes, it gives them a chance to kind of forget about it. And then I've been on the other end too. I've watched, I think, 3 Army Navy games while I was deployed, to Iraq. Wow. So it's an intense game, and we're enemies, during the game, but afterwards, we're brothers in arms.
Yep.
And I've served with some Navy grads and some even former football players, and we tell stories and give each other a hard time, but yeah, it's a patriotic game. We call it America's game.
Yeah.
Because the guys playing in there, we're not going to the NFL. We may have like 1 or 2 that have a chance, but for the most part, we're going to serve our country, as we graduate after that game.
Wow.
Obviously, that's got to be on the bucket list, Steve, for you and I to do, is to go to one of those games, because
can't even imagine.
A friend of mine that did that, and he said it was one of the most incredible things he's ever been to.
Yeah, let me know. I mean, my wife and I, we go every year, and
that's awesome.
Yeah, we're going. Yeah, we're going this year. It's back in Philadelphia. Last year, it was in MetLife in New York. Where the Jets and Giants play. But yeah, we try to go every year, and it's like a reunion. All the former players get together. Even some of the former coaches and trainers. They show up, and
awesome.
The night before the game, we're all at the team hotel, and it's like a mini reunion. So it's a really great time.
was that last year that I saw that? Maybe that was Barry. You saw Barry Wolf?
Yeah, yeah. So Barry Wolf's son is a plebe. He's a freshman at West
Really?
Point, and so he was at the prep school last year, and so Barry went to the game, and yeah, Barry and I met. I think during halftime we met. Took some pictures and
That's
everything.
so
So
cool.
yeah, so I'll probably see Barry this year at the
Yeah,
Army Navy game. So yeah,
that's really
it was
cool.
really cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Korey, talk a little bit about your service. I mean, you said you were in Iraq. How long were you there, and how many tours did you do?
So I did 2 tours in Iraq. I'm a field artillery officer by trade, and so my first tour was only supposed to be 1 year, 12 months, but we got caught up in the historical surge. So we were there for I think 60 days, and we actually found out on CNN that our 12 month deployment was going to turn into a 15-month deployment.
Oh,
So
hello.
we yeah, exactly. We left. So we left in October of 2006 and didn't come back till January 2008. And so, it was two football seasons, 2 Christmases, 2 Thanksgiving, over there in Iraq. You're working, being deployed, you're working 24/7. My only, I wouldn't even say day off, but I'd go to church on Sunday, and that was really my only time off. The rest of the time, it's full systems go. But I would say the one thing, it makes the time go by fast. I remember I tell the story to my folks. I was a battalion operations officer while I was over there, and I was in charge of combat operations for a 450-man unit. And sitting there with all my senior captains, were planning a operation, and I chose the date, and everyone got quiet. And I was like, "What's the problem? Is there an issue?" He's like, "Sir, it's Thanksgiving. You want to plan an operation on Thanksgiving." And I had no idea. That's how focused and caught up you get over there. So okay, but maybe we'll choose another date. Maybe that's not a good day to plan this operation. So yeah.
Incredible.
So then I did another deployment in 2000. So I came back, was back for a year, then went back again, 2009 to 2010. And the whole time, both of my deployments, I was at Fort Hood in Texas, Central Texas, and I was with the 1st Cavalry Division. Very, very historical unit, all the way going back to Vietnam. If you see this movie, We Were Soldiers, that, Air Cav, that's the 1st Cavalry Division that served in Vietnam. So yeah.
Man, thank you for your service, man. That's pretty awesome.
Thank you.
And
it's definitely an honor, pleasure to serve my country. So.
Oh, I mean, we could all feel a little more comfortable with somebody like Korey leading. You said you led a group of 450.
Yeah, that was so I was the operations officer for it. So it's challenging.
Steve, I could barely leave Steve on these podcasts. I can't imagine 450 people.
Because Korey demands respect.
That's right.
So it's challenging, especially in a combat environment. But I'll tell you what, some of the finest men and women serve in our military. And one thing that as a senior leader we always say is, we have those kids, we have them on loan from their mom and dad. So our job is to protect and put them in the best possible situation that we can, so everyone makes it home. During those deployments and operations.
Well, it's incredible. Thank you so much. And speaking of that, let's talk about the family that is left behind when you're gone for all that time. But let's talk about your family and what they're up to, and is there anybody that's still living here, or is everybody back in New York or New Jersey? Where's everybody at?
Yeah, so I'm married. I have a great wife. My wife Donna. She's from the DC area, and I have a daughter, Adasia. She's 13, and she just started playing team sports. So she's into volleyball. She's in her second year of volleyball in 8th grade, and I'm elated. I'm excited. I didn't push her into sports. She kind of did it on her own. Before that, she did competitive dance and cheer, and that is a sport. Dan, I know Teresa was a cheerleader. My sister Karen, she was a cheerleader at Anderson. So that is a sport. But it's volleyball and sports. It's just different. So I'm glad
totally different.
she's gets to experience that. And I didn't realize how intense volleyball is. And
It's awesome.
Women's volleyball is pretty intense.
It is intense, but it's fun to watch too.
It is. It's great. It's exciting. She loves it. She's having fun, and she's pretty good. She's pretty good at it. And so I brought up my sister Karen. So she went to Anderson, and she pretty much grew up in Anderson.
Yeah.
She went to Maddox Elementary, and then went all the way through middle school and graduation. Graduated from Anderson. But her husband is a colonel in the Army.
Oh.
So he's at Fort Belvoir, which is only like 40 minutes away from where I am. So we've been fortunate. There have been 3 times where we've both been stationed in the same place. But Steve, you brought up Iraq. Yeah. It was crazy. I felt bad for her because there was a period of like 3 years where either I was deployed or her husband was deployed. And I was just at my nephew's soccer game. And, we were talking about our deployments. I was talking to my brother-in-law, and he was like, wait, you were in Iraq in 2009? He was like, I was there. I was like, yeah, but you were leaving and I was coming. So I was like, we probably like crossed paths, you were, as you were leaving, I was coming in, we go into Kuwait before we actually went into Iraq. And so yeah, it was a tough period for her. Thankfully, we both, came out, uninjured and okay, but definitely hard on my sister, but yeah, and then so no one lives in Cincinnati. Unfortunately, both my parents passed away. My sister went to after she graduated Anderson, she went to University of North Carolina, and so in Chapel Hill, and she's doing really well. She like I said, she's an Army spouse, but she serves too. She's a Department of the Army civilian lawyer. Attorney.
Oh, wow.
And so she's serving, yeah.
Wow.
And so it's cool. It's pretty cool that we're kind of we didn't come from a military family, but now we're both kind of military families.
That's right.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
So yeah.
Well, good. I'm glad your sister's doing well.
What do you got, Danny?
Oh, me? Is it me, Steve? I'm sorry, buddy.
Geez, he just blew the perfect podcast.
Oh well, I could tell the we talked about this before the call, but I always say it's a small world. The Army's a small world. I was watching. I'm a big fan of your podcast, and I was watching the Jimmy Diana podcast.
Yeah,
and the name Chuck Darvin came up, and I was like, oh, Chuck Darvin. And so small world. So fast. I'm at West Point, and one of my best friends on the football team is from Durham, North Carolina. So I went home with him on a long weekend while we were at West Point. We had a break. And one of his friends came up to me. He was like, hey, Korey, how you doing? Where are you from? I was like, Cincinnati. He's like, we're in Cincinnati. I was like, Anderson. He's like, Anderson Township? I was like, yeah. And then he starts rattling off, Jimmy Diana, Don Marcello, Billy Ramirez. I was like, I know all those guys, and the guy that I'm talking to is Chuck Darvin.
No,
and I think we did the math. I think when he moved out, I think I moved in.
I think so.
We just missed each other.
Yeah.
But I mean, how small the world is that? One of my best friends at West Point, and then it gets even smaller. So my best friend at West Point, my aunt and uncle lived 5 houses down from where he grew up in Durham, North Carolina.
No way.
So it was just like 6 degrees of separation.
That is crazy. I mean, I'm glad that you picked up on me screwing up on the podcast because it kind of leads into what I'm saying. Because I was just going to ask you about keeping in touch with people from high school. So do you keep in touch with any of the guys from high school?
Yeah, I definitely do. So we actually have a fantasy football league, and Mark Carwish is in it, and he's brought his son. Will Carwish. Will's I think a senior linebacker for Anderson now. And then Rob Hitch and John Paxton, Mike Ramirez.
Rob Hitch.
Those guys. Yeah, those guys are in it. So Matt Bailey. So we definitely keep in touch. I think it's like five years in the running now for our fantasy football league. So that's pretty cool. And then probably about 5 years ago, we had a bunch of guys come out here to DC. And we kind of had like a fellas reunion, and hung out. Johnny Diana came out, Mike Ramirez, Matt Bailey, Scott Cons. Unfortunately Scott passed away. Recently. That was tough, but Rob Hitch and yeah, we had a blast. Johnny Paxton, we had a blast. So
great
we're all saying we really got to do that again, but yeah, we still keep in touch. And Facebook is a big ways to keep in touch. I was just looking at some posts from Steve Green and Fred Krace, went on a trip down to the Keys. So yeah, Fred's all over Facebook, man. Fred is crazy. And it's wild, he's married to, his wife Jody. The three of us were in Spanish class together with Miss Sheehan. And I always give Fred a hard time. I was like, hey, is that where it started? Is that where the romance, love affair started?
Oh my gosh, that is crazy. That just speaks volumes of the Anderson. When I do the golf outing and we've talked about this on several podcasts, is that I'm one of the older guys in there, and then we got guys from the class of '83. We got the newer guys in the night, but it's like we all play together, and it's kind of a cool thing that shows that you guys do that with that fantasy football thing. That's kind of a special thing.
I gotta ask you, Korey, and this is just off subject. So you talked about Mark Carwish. So his son Will, who's a senior and a great linebacker for the football team. So my youngest daughter is a senior as well, and they've been starting to talk and hang out together a little bit. So I need to get some inside information on Will Carwish. No, I'm just kidding. He's a great kid. He's a very smart. I think he's the president of his class. He's a very smart kid. He's a good kid.
He is, and he crushed me in fantasy football league I think last week. It was funny because I played Will one week and then Mark the very next week, and both of them killed me.
That's pretty good.
Well, I talk to Mark every Friday at the football games now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mark's a great guy. Yep. He's awesome. Yep. And Will, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and Will's a great kid.
Yeah,
he's a great kid as well, but he comes from good stock, so no surprise.
Exactly right.
Another thing, real quick, is I guess while you were deployed, that was when Anderson went to the state finals, and knowing what we went through, was that kind of just unbelievable to hear that Anderson won a state championship in football?
Yeah, I was shocked. I mean, even when I was at West Point, Anderson started doing well, and and making playoff runs, and that was the thing. I talked to my mom once a week when I was at West Point, and half the time she's giving me updates on Anderson football or Anderson sports, what's going on. And I tell folks we're an Anderson family. My dad was in the Boosters Club, my mom was in the Moms Club, my sister's a cheerleader, and I played football. But yeah, it's great to hear. You kind of wish you had that success when we were playing then. But it's really great to hear. And they still have a great reputation. Even now. That and it started with Sirianno, putting Anderson on the map. Yep. And it's great to see that success that carries on and continues.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to do our little wrap up that we always do, and we try to do some of the memories that you have. And so kind of put you on a spot. I should have kind of warned you about this before, but I need you to give me your favorite high school memory, your favorite college memory, and then maybe you've kind of got into your favorite coach, but maybe a favorite teacher or coach. So let's start off with your favorite high school memory.
So favorite high school memory, and there was actually a post on Facebook. I think it was Leanne Walker Starks. Yeah, I think her son is number 42. Yeah, Chandler plays. So I guess he got into a little scuffle with a Turpin player. Yeah. And so it reminded me of we were scrimmaging Harrison, and they came to our place, and it was Coach Sirianno's, I think, first game. It was a scrimmage. Yeah. And so I was playing fullback. I had a pretty good run, and they knocked me out of bounds, but it was on the Harrison sideline. And so I'm on my back, and I just see the guy that knocked me out standing over me, and he starts talking trash. So I take the football. And I throw it up in his face. I was like, "Get the F off me!" And all I can remember is just a swarm of green jerseys on top of me, And then all of a sudden, I just see jerseys. Flying out of the pile, and I see this hand reach in and grab me. it's my dad. He
No.
was doing the chains on the Harrison sideline.
Oh,
And he basically was just throwing people off and grabbed me and pulled me out of the pile to make sure I was okay.
Wow.
And, my dad, he's not that tall. He was like 5'7", but he wrestled in college at like 150. So he's like, he's put together.
Yeah.
And then so yeah, that was awesome. It was intense. And even afterwards, I think it was Chris Berger's dad was saying, yeah, your dad was like shaking even like 30 minutes after that incident. He was just so hyped, But we were watching the next day, we were watching the film of the game. And the biggest memory, and this is just so Coach Sirianno, when the fight broke out, Coach Sirianno dead sprint across the field. And it was almost like a V battle formation.
Yeah.
Because you just see the whole team behind Coach Sirianno, in a V formation coming across to help me out. And I just looked at that and I was just like, wow, that's awesome.
Yes, sir.
That is, Coach Sirianno was like, all right, Korey, next time just do it on our sideline. Don't do it on their sideline. Do it on ours. But yeah, Coach Sirianno was one of the first ones over there. My dad threw me, grabbing people and throwing them off, and Coach Sirianno sprinting out there. But yeah, so that's definitely a great memory that I was thinking about recently, from Anderson. And then I would say, West Point, there's a lot, but definitely, just I would just say the Army Navy games. It's just the rivalry. I remember watching it as a kid, and then being a part of it. It's just, it's hard. It's almost hard to put into words and describe. And it's the only game where normally we play, and then if we're away we go straight to the airport from the stadium and fly back to West Point. But Army Navy, we stay there after the game. Win or lose, we stay there after the game. And just talking to the old grads, I remember seeing Pete Dawkins, Heisman Trophy winner. He was at one of the games, and it's just a lot of history behind it, a lot of tradition, and just being a part of that was just really special. And now I'm one of, talking to old grads. Now I'm one of those old grads, that's at the game and talking to the to the players.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. And former, like I said, Coach Letterby is really up there. I tell people he's almost like a second dad, and he calls me his son. But the other person I would say that, and you guys know him well, is Coach Wolf. Andy Wolf.
Yeah.
I had him as a teacher and as a coach. So I played, I did track, my junior and senior year. Was co-captain of the track team my senior year. So I did shot put, discus, and sprints. Just in terms of lifelong service, to Anderson, he's up there. I'm glad to see him getting the recognition with the field. He'll be the first to tell you, you don't need to do that. I don't need, and he's still out there, serving, and volunteering, with the track team and cross country. So when I was there for the reunion, I was really glad I ran into him. I saw him.
Oh, good.
And again, he was just coming from a cross country beat, had all kinds of equipment he was offloading, but I was glad I was able to see him, introduce him to my wife, but yeah, Coach Wolf, he definitely has a special place in my memories of Anderson.
You've had two of the legendary coaches that you've had right there, Wolf and Soriano, and then obviously Bud Letterby. I mean, that's some pretty impressive coachings there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
definitely.
Korey, we really appreciate your time. I know you're busy, and we're just so glad that we got a hold of you. And I mean it, man. When you come in town, you gotta just give us some warning so we know when you're coming, and we'll try to get as many people, because I'm sure half Anderson Township would love to hang out with you. And so
definitely we go to Todd Sledge's place. Todd's an old buddy of mine. So yeah,
go to the lounge, yes, sir. Yeah, he's got to go. He'd probably love to see. He'd probably close the place up for you, probably. He would. So, but no, we really appreciate it. And again, thank you for your service, and thank you for everything. And I'm just so glad that your dad moved to Anderson Township for us to get to become friends. And like I said, you're one of the best teammates I've had. And so, but again, thank you again for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Dan, Steve. It's been a pleasure, and again, congratulations on Hall of Fame. Salute both of you gentlemen. Thank you for all you do. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Korey. I really appreciate it. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up here.
Thank you, Korey.
Steve Ellis, Dan Albers, and Korey Mitchell, you've been watching This Week in Anderson. We'll catch you next week.